On Wednesday, two powerful 7.2 and 7.5 magnitude earthquakes struck Venezuela, toppling buildings and severely damaging that country's main international airport. Now, as of this morning, the death toll has risen to at least 920, with nearly 3,400 more injured and many thousands missing. The U.S. Geological Survey says that with earthquakes of this size, the estimated death toll is expected to exceed 10,000.
Of course, also a first big test for acting Venezuelan President Delcy Rodriguez, as it could be what makes or breaks her potential regime. For the latest on the recovery and rescue operations in Venezuela, we're joined by Bloomberg's Andreina Itriago. Ina, great to speak with you. And I want to ask you first just about the figures that we cited just a moment ago. How much credence should we give to them as we look at sort of the spread, the geographic spread of this disaster, and see the buildings that have collapsed and reports that there are many more that are in really dire shape? How likely is it that those numbers of casualties, deaths, are much higher than are being reported?
Yeah, there's a probability that they are way higher. The thing is that the international support arrived just between Thursday night and yesterday, so it wasn't until then that the rescue labor properly began. So we are expecting that number to rise considerably in the coming days, especially as the bodies are recovered from what remains of the buildings that came down. There's an estimate by the government as well that nearly 1,500 buildings or infrastructure came down with these earthquakes, so we're expecting the number to get way higher. And also the opposition has set up this website or platform where people is reporting missing persons, and by now, as of today, 7 a.m. Bogota time, the number had risen to nearly 70,000 people. So we're talking about a lot of people still missing, and well, we'll see what happens as the rescue labors unfold.
With the government in kind of this interesting status, I was reading that folks on the ground haven't seen the Venezuelan military on the ground helping clear this rebel like they might have in times before with Maduro in charge. What is the capacity of this government to do search and rescue operations, to get in there and move the rebel? Or are they really just relying on international aid at this point?
The capacity the government has is very low. Actually, like the Venezuelan opposition pointed this out yesterday in a statement. And what we saw in the first, I would say 48 hours after the earthquakes was that it was the people who were doing most of the things. Like people went to these disaster areas and they tried to start pulling others from what remained of the buildings. The capacity is very low, and yeah, they are relying very highly on this international support. What we were hearing from doctors especially is that this happened in a moment where Venezuela was already struggling or facing a deep humanitarian crisis. So yeah, this happens. The government has very low capacity to handle this. However, I must say that Venezuela government deployed troops in the La Guaira area, which was the state that was most affected. But this was more in a security way to prevent looting and other actions that might follow after an event like this.
I want to ask you lastly just about the role that the U.S. is playing here. Before I get there, let me just play a bit of sound here of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who of course has been so integrally involved in what's happened in Venezuela over the last many months, talking about this disaster and the path forward. Let's take a listen.
I had an opportunity to talk earlier this morning with Delcy Rodriguez, the acting president. We're obviously awaiting we're already deploying search and rescue teams from Fairfax County, Virginia, and Los Angeles. There'll be some others we'll add. That's their most immediate need right now, is search and rescue efforts. They have a bunch of collapsed buildings, and so they'll need a lot of help in terms of digging through that. The airport there is badly damaged, so we'll have to rely on the Department of War to deploy assets there. And then we're also helping them with some overhead imagery, especially in coastal areas where they don't have full visibility over what the damage has been and what the impact has been.
You know, he's talking about a big project there, and I think part of this larger project the U.S. has now with Venezuela. I wonder if you kind of marry these two things. Yes, U.S. aid for this disaster, but this kind of broader new tack that the U.S. is taking toward Venezuela.
Yeah, definitely. U.S. has been very involved in all of this. As Secretary of State said, they are sending 250 personnel to Venezuela right now. But it's not the first time that we're seeing this over the past months. After the U.S. capture of Nicolas Maduro, the U.S. has been deeply involved in all of Venezuelan situation. We've been seeing very top-rank officials from the U.S. Visiting Venezuela over the past months. It's a challenge for both the U.S. Trump administration and the Delcy Rodriguez interim government, this whole situation. And it's still to see, like, analysts are waiting to see how they both handle the situation, because I think it depends. What happens now will determine definitely what happens in the next months in Venezuela.